Imagine a small child has chronic chest pain. It's inexplicable. Nobody knows why. That was a reality for me. I was diagnosed with bronchitis, and then after that, medication didn't work, pneumonia, and after that, nobody knew. They sent me to a specialist to get my lungs x-rayed. What they found was actually quite interesting. It was coccidioidomycosis, also known as valley fever, or COXY for short. What this disease does is it inhabits mostly southern Arizona, Texas, dry, arid climates. It lives in the dirt. And what this does is it gets into your respiratory system. When you breathe it in, it attaches into your lung cavity. A dry or a moist environment like that, a dark, moist environment like your lungs, is a perfect breeding ground for a fungal virus. Now, coccidioidomycosis, there are different forms, and I was diagnosed with acute COXY. And what that is where you'll have lung buildup, which can be phlegm, fever, headaches, migraines, and the like. Now, mine actually required an operation. What they had to do was go in and fix a collapsed lung. This lung had actually displaced my heart and my trachea where it shouldn't have been, which could have posed other complications. Now, when you do have acute COXY, one of the problems is you don't really know it. It's like pneumonia, it's like bronchitis, but when you're given the antibiotics for pneumonia and bronchitis, that just helps the virus grow, the fungus grow. So those antibiotics are just feeding it. Now, they had to go in, they had to fix the lung. I had about maybe 2 to 3 weeks to live. I didn't even know. I was in first grade. How was I supposed to know any better? What happened was, my other lung was about ready to be infected. So there was a possibility that both my lungs could have eventually filled up with fluid, my breathing would have become shallow, and I would eventually suffocate. Believe it or not, but I consider myself fortunate that I didn't get chronic coccidioidomycosis. It wasn't the worst form, but it also wasn't the best. There's also disseminated coccidioidomycosis. This is the worst form. This is a life-altering form because it never goes away. You have to adapt your diet. You have to change the way you live in order to live with the fungus. It goes throughout your body. It changes where it goes. So it starts in your lungs, and it moves to your heart, your liver, your brain, any of those, and it stays there, essentially. So you have to change your carbohydrates. You have to change your sugars. You have to monitor that and make sure you don't overdo it. Otherwise, the virus, the disease is going to eventually recede. It's going to come back. A recession would be where you monitor your diet, you eat very healthy, and you maintain a good lifestyle. Now, symptoms. I'm going to go ahead and hit the symptoms. Acute COXY. You have fever, cough, chest pain. That's what I had. I had extreme chest pain. It's like you're being stabbed in the chest, like your sternum area, right where your lungs are. Chills, night sweats, headaches. I had headaches. Joint aches and red spotty rashes throughout your body, mainly on your legs. In order to make sure that my COXY had not disseminated, what they did was give me a spinal tap, because that's how it transfers into the brain. That's one of the main things they want to monitor, is just make sure that the COXY does not get to your brain. So they gave me a spinal tap. They took out spinal fluid to have it tested, but one of the complications of that is it's difficult to live without spinal fluid. I didn't have spinal fluid for around 2 weeks. It took me about 2 weeks to replenish that supply. And that was a very gruesome 2 weeks. It was difficult. I had extreme headaches. They were excruciating. I'd stand up and I have to sit right back down because I felt like I was going to black out from pain. My parents would give me Coca-Cola, Pepsi, and a lot of water to keep me hydrated and, nourished. And eventually, it's just one of those things you have to wait out. There's nothing you can do to immediately fix that. So, test results came back. Fortunately, I didn't have disseminated COXY. It was just acute chronic COXY. And it was a one-time thing. They reinflated my lung. They took out the part that was actually infected. So the spores were on the bottom portion of my lung. And what they had to do was go in there and just take it out. So I don't have a complete lung on that side. It didn't really affect me. I can still hold my breath for 2 minutes. It's not a big deal. But I don't have that part of my lung. They replaced it, stitched it back together with some staples, and drained all the fluid, of course, that was in there. Now, it's something to keep in mind. When you're out in the desert you're in a dust storm or anything like that, make sure that you are aware of the potential risk. Horseback riding even. Anything that stirs up dust can potentially give you valley fever. It's something you should keep in mind and be aware of. Thank you.